Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Smith, Executive Director at Lincoln Park Coast Cultural District. Lincoln Park is a community, as I said earlier, Lincoln Park is doing the work of restorative community economic development and a hybrid of that and creative placemaking, placekeeping. We're a nonprofit situated here on, as I call it, the black side of Broad Street. Lincoln Park was founded by activists with the intention to shifting the paradigm of the investment of what I call the black and brown side of downtown. Our founding board members included Frederica Bay, Tony Schumann, the late Amiri Baraka, and our longest sitting board member, Dr. Teresa Marshall, to name a few. Lincoln Park actually started here in 1999, here in the Terrace Ballroom with a 3-day charrette. Lincoln Park actively utilizes creative placemaking to plan, design, and develop a comprehensive arts and culture district in the Lincoln Park neighborhood in downtown Newark. We have built over 100 units of housing, produced actually this is our 18th anniversary of the Lincoln Park Music Festival coming up this year. 18 years, imagine that. And this was our 20th anniversary this year, starting this year of Lincoln Park Coast Cultural District. We have reached, through our community engagement and programming, over 800,000 people since its inception. The opportunity for the disenfranchised members of our community to participate and contribute. And that's what we are here today for, to make sure that Black creatives, artists, artistic developers, current and future residents have equitable access and opportunity to participate in a creative economy. To live, create, work, play, and thrive within a 20-minute walk or a 6 to 10 block radius where they live. That's the creative economy. I'd like to introduce my panelists. I'm very excited that everyone is here today. First, we have Jean-Pierre Brutus. And I'll say right? Jean-Pierre is a senior counsel in the Economic Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice. He leads the Institute's reparations advocacy and housing advocacy prior to joining the Institute. Jean-Pierre worked at Legal Services in New York City, where he represented the Bronx tenants facing eviction as part of New York's Right to Counsel program. Jean-Pierre is a graduate of Georgetown University. He earned his PhD in African American Studies and has a JD from Northwestern University. Then we have my friend, our Newarker, Miss Marjorie Perry, a lifelong resident of Newark, New Jersey, is president and CEO of MZM Construction and Management Company. She was trained as an educator with a BA from King College, but in her career move, she decided to try her luck in sales and marketing, and she went to work for corporate giants like 3M, Johnson & Johnson, United Airlines, ultimately cultivating a vision for a life as a passionate, self-made entrepreneur. She and 2 partners founded MZM Construction and Management. Soon after, she became the sole principal owner of the company, which has sustained a multi-million-dollar bottom line for the last 24 years. As importantly, she is widely recognized as an innovator, public speaker, writer, role model, and role model for women and minorities in business. Thank you, Marjorie. Then we have, I'm gonna skip over the mayor for a moment and go to Sharnita. We have Sharnita Johnson, is Victoria Foundation's first ever Vice President of Strategic Impact and Communication. In this role, Sharnita provides oversight and management of all the programmatic activities, ensuring alignment with the Foundation's goals and values. She leads the development and implementation of the Victoria's grant-making, success measures, communication, and leadership on equity and justice. Most recently, Sharnita served as the Arts Program Director for the Gerald D. Ardouch Foundation, where she led the statewide grant-making portfolio focused on arts, equity, and creative placemaking. Sharnita played an intricate role in the Foundation's transformation in its mission to address root causes and repair of structural racism and equity. Sharnita has a wealth of lived and professional experience. Born and raised in Detroit, our sister city, she is a recognized leader who has shaped more than 20 years of nonprofit experience, deep community roots, and a legacy of family entrepreneurship. Thank you, Shanita. And our mayor of the great city of Newark, New Jersey, a native of Newark whose family has lived in the city for more than 80 years. Mayor Baraka's progressive approach to governing has won him accolades from grassroots organizations to the White House. With a forward-thinking agenda that reduced crime to its lowest levels in 5 decades, addressed affordability while maintaining steady growth, lowered unemployment, returned local control of the schools after more than 2 decades, and replaced all 23,000 known lead service lines in less than 3 years at no cost to the residents. That was a feat. And I always said, when that happened, and the pandemic happened, I said, well, he's catching hell. Baraka has defied expectations since taking office in 2014. Mayor Baraka is recognized nationally as a thought leader in the space of urban revitalization, received his Bachelor's of Arts degree in Poli-Sci and History from Howard University in Washington, D.C., and a Master's degree in Education from St. Peter's University in New Jersey. So allow me to introduce our mayor, Mayor Raz J. Baraka. Today's panel is called Development While Black, Creative Placemaking for the Culture, Creative Placemaking for the Culture. What is the creative economy? As per Americans for the Arts, there are 4 components. 1, economic ecosystem. 2, economic activity. 3, inclusive creative economy. And 4, creative economic practices. The panel will explore the transformative potential of creative placemaking and promoting cultural equity and building vibrant communities. The panel will examine the direct lineage from the 90 years post-New Deal redlining, the Black wealth gap attributed to the lack of real estate ownership, and the struggle to find balance in a world-class vibrant art city, the city of Newark, during its post-COVID renaissance era marked the tremendous development and revitalization. Thank you all for joining us today. This first question is for Jean-Pierre. Here we are in 2023, 90 years after the New Deal, talking about ownership of spaces and places in order to amplify and support the creative economy. Before we can get to the arts, Black ownership of place and spaces, land, real estate, development, and even a home, we still not achieve equity with our white counterparts. Jean, 400 years later, why are we still behind? What is redlining and how do we surmount these obstacles?
Well, first, good afternoon, everyone. We're almost post-afternoon, so good afternoon. I want to say thank you to Anthony, thank you to Kimberly Porter, and thank you to my fellow panelists for having me today, or Kimberly Ford, I should say, I'm sorry. And thank you to my fellow panelists. It's an honor to be here. And I think before we get to redlining, I want to give a deeper historical context, and I want to go back to slavery in New Jersey. When New Jersey was founded as a colony by the Dutch had already instituted slavery, and it was taken over by the British in the mid-17th century. And the British already had slavery in the Caribbean, but the British wanted to essentially establish slavery in New Jersey. And one of the ways they did that was basically to attract rich planters, rich enslavers from Barbados to come to New Jersey, to establish slavery in New Jersey. So what they did was, they provided white enslaved families and colonial settlers 150 acres of land to come to New Jersey. And then they provided them an additional 150 acres of land for each enslaved person they had, so that they could get the wealthiest planters from Barbados to come to New Jersey and establish a new regime. In doing that, they also passed a series of slave codes that barred enslaved Black people, as well as free Black people, from owning land. So right there you have a racialized system right from the beginning of New Jersey's creation. Then, post-slavery, during emancipation, you had a creation of racial zoning, barring Black folks from certain neighborhoods. But I want to fast forward to what Anthony discussed around the New Deal. Commonly understood, the New Deal is seen as one of the most progressive moments in American history, which it is in many ways. But the New Deal was only possible because of political expediency, because of FDR's administration, Southern Democrats to get this legislation passed. In so doing, he had to exclude black folks from the deal, one. Two, let's not forget that when we think about the Great Depression, it's not just, a terrible economic time, it's also a major failure of capitalism, right? And because it was a major failure of capitalism, folks started to look elsewhere for alternatives, for other possibilities of what could be, right? They were looking to Russia and other countries for other systems. And so the US had to design a system for people to be invested in, right? The middle class at that time, right, buying a home was rather difficult. You would have to put 50% down just to purchase a home, 5 to 7 year mortgages. So the US government created two entities, the HOLC, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration. Those two entities made it much easier for the middle class to buy homes, right? Providing 8% of mortgages, 15 to 25 year mortgages, allowing for equity in your home. But those entities had to assess risk. And in assessing risk, they would identify areas that were red, where they would draw a red line on the map, or green for those that they would invest in, provide the loans, the credit. Now, in their manual, the underwriting manual, they identified that they wanted communities and populated areas, neighborhoods, to be racially homogenous. Basically, if it was a black community, they would draw a red line and say we would not invest there, would not provide the FHA loans. That is what redlining is, right? It's literally the drawing of the red lines on the map to not provide the credit, the loans, the services to those communities. And so in Newark, in New Jersey, and around the country, you will see these maps, you can see it online, of the redlining happening, right? This happens up until 1968, the ending of this legally through the 1968 Fair Housing Act. But, as with the rest of the history of the United States, racism continues in the form of modern redlining. And as the mayor well knows, recently just in Newark, and as many of you know, Lakeland Bank was just found liable of violating the Fair Housing Act by the Department of Justice for engaging in modern redlining, right? The process of basically doing the same kind of thing without the maps, not providing black folks and people of color throughout Newark and New Jersey with the kind of services to purchase a home, right? And the DOJ found them liable, right? This was egregious. Part of this is going on, continuing. I'm sure there are other banks throughout the country and in New Jersey who are doing this, right? And thankfully we have a DOJ, but all these practices, including racially restrictive covenants, as you know, during the 1930s and 1940s and 1910s and 1920s, where we specifically say this home could not be sold to a person who is not white, right, to create white neighborhoods. This contributed to the massive racial homeownership gap in the United States and in New Jersey, where 78% of white folks own their home compared to just 37% of black folks, which helps to fuel the racial wealth gap. And so when we talk about homeownership, we have a history in this country in which the government has subsidized, supported white families, like the GI Bill, in which you think that, the biggest and most clearest demonstration of fitness, right, for citizenship would be serving in the military, ostensibly, apparently, right? And so black folks in World War II went abroad to fight for the double V, for the victory abroad against fascism and to come back to the US to fight against Jim Crow. When they came back here to participate in this economy and get the benefits of the GI Bill, they were denied for no other reason than simply being black. And so for the 67,000 folks in northern New Jersey and New York who were eligible for the GI Bill, less than 100 of those who received those benefits were black folk. Wow. Right? So that helped to create a modern middle class, yet a white middle class. So we have the situation we find in here today, and that's the historical context.
Whoa. Thank you for that. Marjorie, as a black woman developer, having worked on such notable projects as Delta Airlines at Port Authority, Verizon, Continental Airlines for the Marriott Courtyard, the new Meadowlands Stadium, and the Jersey Performing Arts Center. On the other side of downtown, have you ever overcome barriers to entry? As we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what does developing through a cultural lens mean or look like for you?
Well, I'm going to start with three parts. I'm going to follow up on what James has just said. Today's racism is money. Okay? That's the new racism. So if you have redlining before, for instance, we just had an opportunity to bid a project that was going to be about $10 million. The new excuse was you don't have experience and we've been in business for 30 years. Jesus. So there's three things that's happening for barriers to entry. One, we're not financially able to get the resignation of the money to even do what they asked us to do. There is a new building going up now for the county, which is going to be the new courthouse. You probably have 2 businesses of color on that project, 2. And they probably have a contract valued at maybe $200,000, $300,000, so they can say we checked off the box because we have inclusion. DE&I, I'm a little bit biased about DE&I because we have diversity, check, and we have inclusion, allegedly, check. The E, no one talks about. No one talks about the E. So, all the past year, just doing what the mayor wanted us to do, and I'll just use that as a discussion point, is try to go in these communities, the South Ward, I grew up in the Central Ward, other people grew up in the East Ward. How can we coalesce around one another? Here's the other barrier. People of color don't like working with other people of color. I said it. The battle for you to trust me is tough. So now I have to go every week because any project you even do for the city is prevailing wage. The average carpenter makes $69 an hour. I have to have 20 of them on that project. So we have to start talking about the E, which is the real barrier, the economic piece, because now private equity probably is, are we still at about 70% in Newark? Buying up the real estate in Newark. I'm born and raised here, 70 years. I've seen it up, I've seen it down, and I've seen the rebirth. Here's what has to happen. We have to become more financially, not literate, savvy. Most people can't read the performer that somebody puts in front of them on what we are doing. Then you have to do the next piece. Even if you're not a major person in it, or you don't have to go back and get an MBA, there are plenty of programs to teach you, NJRA, whatever, just on development, that you can move your needle just by understanding the numbers. Now when you go in and talk to a person that might be of white, you can say, John, yeah, I know you are a civil engineer and you know how to put these performers together. Let's just say the average project that's going up in the City of Newark is anywhere from $60 million and above. You gotta understand the numbers. Number 2, stop surrounding yourself with people that can't take you to the next level. Did I say that? Should I say that again? If I have one more person come in and say, this is my uncle, my aunt, my brother, well, do you understand business? Number 3, stop taking everything personal. Business will take you out in 5 minutes if you get personal. Well, I don't like Marge Perry. She thinks she's better than everybody. Well, I do think I'm better than everybody. I'm trying to get the job done. How are we going to get the job done? Don't worry about liking me. Stop taking it personal. It's a great book, The 4 Agreements. Read it. Yes. The 4 Agreements. 3, keep your word clean and clear. I have more people who want to take and they bring nothing back. What is your best A game? So those are the things that I'm going to speak to for barriers to entry. We need to not forget financial literacy. There's plenty of those. I'm talking about financial savvy. And then I'm talking about really learning how to partner up. 90% of my success has been because I partnered up. And you have to understand their language in order for them to even entertain, so that you can partner with them. So, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Margie, for that. Sharnita, from a funding lens, how might philanthropists shift their giving to support BIPOC leadership and especially creative placemaking?
So, first of all, that was amazing. I just want to go sit in the audience now and listen. But I'll say a couple of things. So philanthropy should, I'm not saying that it should be risk capital. So we should, as a sector, take those chances that, say, a financial institution won't take. And some of us do and some of us don't. I think that another thing that we have to think about is relationships. So philanthropy is not equitable either, because there are so few Black and brown people leading foundations. I think that Craig Drinkard, who is the executive officer of the Victoria Foundation, is the only Black person leading a private foundation in Newark. So the notion that the field is populated with people that have the lived experience, the relationships, is not accurate. And that helps with the trust building, with the relationship building. And we're not gonna program or project ourselves out of this inequity either. So it's some policy changes that need to happen to really make the changes that, although there are some great projects and programs. For example, Victoria Foundation is supporting a program that worked with Bank of America and Invest Newark, I believe, to take folks that were on Section 8 vouchers toward home ownership. So the foundation was able to invest in a PRI, which is a program-related investment, which is really a below-market loan for that project. And we want to do more of those types of programs, but it took multiple years to get all of the space, all of the people in the room that needed to be in the room, to get all the numbers correct, to work with the city and others. So it's not that this happens really quickly either. And it's also a new way of working for a lot of foundations. So I have worked in the Kellogg Foundation in Detroit, which has a whole department that does nothing but PRIs and mission-related investments, where they might have an equity stake in a deal, but they also have a $9 billion endowment. So just thinking about the philanthropy resources that are available, there are not a lot of private foundations in New Jersey, period, let alone in Newark. So we're trying to think about, at Victoria anyway, how do we partner better with our colleagues? How do we put resources together to, Victoria makes $12 million in grants a year. That's not a lot of money. We could spend that on one block in one day. So we really have to figure out how we partner with financial institutions. We have the solutions in the community. We have folks that know what this is about, but how do we resource them? And that is sort of the biggest barrier that I think that we have, is figuring out how we can deploy those resources to make sure that these deals happen, to make sure that people are educated around how to be a developer. So Anthony said, I'm from Detroit. I'm working on a development project myself. So I'm dealing with philanthropy on both sides. I was able to get funding for my project, but I have a back of an envelope pro forma. And if you show me that spreadsheet, my eyes are gonna glaze over. But, I know some of the lingo, so in a meeting I might sound like I halfway know something, but there are there's some programs in Detroit where they're teaching people how to become developers. And it's developmental, and it's a step by step by step. And it's also thinking about who has control of the land too. So my dad was like, they're not making any more land. So I'm like, well, we are holding on to every little raggedy piece of property we have in this whole family. And so I inherited this building that I'm trying to develop into an art space, but I'm learning along the way all of the barriers. Yet I see people not from Detroit, don't have linkages there, come in and they get all the money. And so I literally have asked people, how did you finance this project? What is in your capital stack? And some people have been very forthcoming. People, and I'm just gonna say, not from Detroit, don't look like us. And I was direct though, and they told me, we got it from here, from here, from here. We've flipped a house, we had some savings or whatever. We have to start talking about these things in our communities, in our families. You know, I am working on this project as a legacy project for my nephews and nieces. And I sit them down and I say, look, these are my carrying costs for this project. Every month I still have to pay utilities, I have to pay taxes, like it's not free. So I'm doing this for you. So that's the thing that we have to really start to talk about too, is what are the financial implications and being transparent about what the real costs are.
Thank you. And generational wealth is very important, being able to pass it down and having that opportunity. And that's a great segue to Mayor Baraka. Mayor, the Lincoln Park Neighborhood Alliance was an idea you spearheaded in, I can't remember the date, September 2017. You brought us all together. The purpose of the alliance was to collectivize the power of Newark Symphony Hall, Newark Arts, Lincoln Park Coast Cultural District, and at the time, City Without Walls, to stimulate funding to this powerful unit along the southern end of Broad Street. Yes, collective is the word. It means the act of making something apply to a group of people as a whole rather than as individuals. Yes, we want to collectivize down here in Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park Neighborhood Alliance, which we are reigniting here today in this space, is just a policy. It's just one policy or program you have spearheaded to stem the tide of inequity in who owns Newark. You are actively working to return land, homes, and spaces to Newarkers and artists. Can you sum it up for us today? Where do we go from here?
Well, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Lincoln Park Coast Cultural District, Symphony Hall, the Alliance, everybody that's part of the collective. Thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to do it. Thank all the artists and developers that are here today. Artists actually make communities more viable, more economically, upwardly mobile, make them safer. So artists are important. You probably do better if you had 100,000 artists as opposed to 100,000 police. So it's important that we have artists in our community at all levels, period. So the things that we're fighting against are so vast and so heavy, right? These are things that existed. I always joke with you at the U.S. Conference of Mayors with other mayors. It's like we are always critiqued for trying to solve problems that we didn't create, that existed decades before we got here, that are so endemic and systemic that they're too heavy for one person to lift up and carry, which is why I always talk about the necessity to have a collaborative, a collective, because if you ask me to pick this podium up, I can do that. But the entire stage, I'm going to need everybody's hands on it to help move it. And that's what it needs. And what Marjorie talked about is incredibly important because our lack of trust with one another makes it very difficult for us to move these heavy objects. And so we're looking for other people to move objects for us who don't have the interest in doing so. They're not going to do it because it doesn't serve their individual or collective interests. It serves our interest to get it moved, but then we have to figure out how to do it together, right? Or it can't be moved. We'd rather talk about how each one of us are inadequate at moving it ourselves, as opposed to putting our hands on it and giving each other a hand. And so that's fundamentally what we're trying to do here is get everybody collectively together. When we have those separate meetings a month for women, for men, we try to teach development, contracting, all of these things, so people can figure out how to begin to get property and own it and develop it and refurbish it. And it's working slowly, but it's working, right? And people are buying property, they're moving forward in that. But the rate at which the city is developing, right, and the rate at which it's growing is outpacing people's salary increases, is outpacing our ability to move these things as far as we can. So we have to incentivize and expedite and do everything that we can do to speed people up. So we do the Section 8 home ownership, we do the $1 opportunities, we try to create this neighborhood development to get developers together, to force people to be in a room together, to force people to work with Marjorie and say, we're only gonna give you the property if you work with everybody together and figure out how to work together to move these things along. And it's a long stretch, but it's necessary because you have people that have money already. And once the market turns, See, people try to make you believe this is like somebody who has a button and they push it and things go in a specific direction. That's not how this thing works. It doesn't work this way. The market forces don't work that way. There's no button in City Hall you push and say, everybody from outside come to Newark. That's not how it works. The market changes because the saturation that takes place in Jersey City and Hoboken and New York. So if affordability in New York downtown Manhattan is $3,000 an apartment, $2,000 seems affordable to individuals in New York, so they're going to come to Newark, who's used to paying $1,000, right? So those folks are going to come, and the landlords are going to raise your rent to $2,000 because they can get those rents. The market is saying, I can get those rents now because the people in New York have nowhere else to go. They can't go to Jersey City, they can't go to Hoboken, they can't go to West New York or Edgewater, so they got the next stop on the train is Newark. And so your rent is going to increase because their rent is too high. And that's how the market forces work. So you have to interrupt that by creating programs, inclusionary zoning, creative catalyst funding, dollar housing, all these kind of things to stem the tide of capitalism, because these things work naturally. These how these things work. And because we're not in a position to protect ourselves, our job in the city is to try to protect as many people as possible. Here's the downside of it, that everybody is not going to be protected. Because the speed and veracity of capital that moves into your community happens at such a rate of speed that it's almost impossible for everyone to be saved by it, right? So what we have to do is protect ourselves, right? We have to come together, build for ourselves, invest in our own stuff. The only way you stop gentrification is buy the things in your community. You have to buy it. You have to own it. People can't take stuff that you own. You have to purchase it. We have to purchase it from as raggedy and torn down to whatever. We have to see it as beautiful and not as raggedy and torn down. Somebody else sees it as beautiful and it's raggedy and torn down. They're going to make it into something. Then you're going to be talking about how you used to live there. As opposed to you beginning to get on the ground and getting this stuff now. Why is it gettable, right? Go ahead and try to do that. So that's really what we're trying to do as a city, open people's eyes. Because you start talking about financial literacy, all of the banks, they always come to the city and be like, oh, we have a great financial literacy program. And I was like, well, that's great. I wonder if they had that when Rockefeller made his money. But I don't know how do you teach people financial literacy that don't have any money. Right? So at the end of the day, you really have to figure out how to get money in people's hands and then teach them how to manage it. But you gotta get money in people's hands. You gotta get resources and capital in people's hands. That is the biggest problem. We do not have capital. We don't have upfront capital. The last thing is the way we did the lead service lines. There are people who are millionaires because of lead service lines. That's the part of the story that you won't hear. There are people who look like us who made money in Newark, from Newark, because of the lead service lines. Why? Because we forced the people with the contracts to have subcontractors that were Newark residents that were black and brown, right? And so what they said to them, like they said to Marjorie, which is, look, you guys don't have the experience and you don't have the capital, you don't have the balance sheet, you can't do this. So what we're doing, if you want $80 million, you got to give $5 million to this organization. And the city is going to upfront the capital to them so that they can lease the equipment, so they can take care of their balance sheet, and we're just going to take our money off the top. And so when we take our money off the top, it also improves their credit, right? Because they're now paying their bills on time because we're taking the money off of the top. So the bank has to look at them differently. So now you got the people who did that in Newark who are doing it in Trenton and other places now, and they're the primary on the project as opposed to the sub, right? And we have to move from sub to primary. And that was difficult. I want you to clap because it was like an easy thing. That was hard as hell to do. Right? It's hard to do because you got to train people, you got to get them to come to the class actually. You got to make them feel like, that it's important for them to be a part of this project, to take care of their balance sheet, that we had to pay the bill because we needed to pay it on time, and we had to create a program to give them the capital up front. All of this stuff doesn't happen like that. It's not anywhere, these things don't happen this way. You have to be very deliberate about making those things happen because the idea is if you don't have the money, then you can't get the project. Right? You can't get the project if you don't have the money. You can't get, because the city is going to pay you after the work is done. That's the part you don't understand. You don't get paid up front. You get paid after the work is done. So who's gonna pay your workers while they're working, right? Only people that can do that are people with patient capital and with people that have large corporations that have money that can pay people to work and wait for their check 60 days later, 90 days later. Some businesses a year later, the way we do it in Newark sometimes. So, I'm telling you, it's real. So if you're a small, mid-sized person, you in trouble. I know Margie had to struggle with that a bunch of times. And the difference is, like, at least it's people in Newark who will fight for these folks, right? We're not gonna allow you to just get abused, and because they will abuse you, without us coming to the table and saying, look, you gotta take care of these people, or we don't take care of you, right? And that's, so it's we need everybody's help.
Thank you. We're going to open the floor for two questions. Any questions? Anybody have a question from the floor? Come to the mic.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing? My name is Isaiah Jones. One of my questions is well, it's not really a question, it's a comment, because this was my first year in college and I got real knowledgeable on stuff. Thank you. So basically what I've been seeing is how in our education system, right? It seems like it's really set up for people of my age to fail, because we're not learning any financial literacy or financial anything. We're not learning civic engagement. We don't learn how to basically become successful and to be just a middle-class person. So what I think is it has to be ways where we could maybe rebuild the education system. Especially since we didn't start the education system. We don't teach what we created. This is other people. So how could we change the education system so students could, and black kids could start getting more engaged and being into politics and into finances and into these type of things. So this won't happen, because now you have 30, 40, 50-year-olds that aren't financially illiterate, so a lot of people can't really read as well. How can we stop that from the younger generation? How can we get that to not happen to the younger generation? Because it's happening.
Well, I would tell you as an educator that the education system wasn't designed for you to participate at this level that we're talking about. It's designed so you can be a laborer, a worker. We still have an agrarian educational system. The way it's set up, the way it's designed, the scheduling, everything is designed so you can work. The things that we're advancing and talking about here is stuff that are not people in our communities don't grapple with in high school. They should, and in some communities around the country they do. And I would agree with you, the education system needs to be overhauled completely, from scheduling to everything else. But more importantly, to represent you. So I don't think education even represents who we are as people, right? They're talking about banning books in some cities. We way beyond the banned book place, right? So at the end of the day, it's not culturally relevant to you. It doesn't make sense. It's not useful. And so we have to make it useful. And so we need folks like you and other folks that are in education to begin to advocate to change the curriculum and how it's being delivered to folks in our community, to get people to stay in school and be a part of that. It's incredibly important what you say. Look, there are more black kids in college now probably than the history of this country. The problem is a lot of them aren't graduating, right? And so it's not even about just getting people in college, it's about getting them to finish, right? So the preparation that you need to finish is not there. And it's not just academic, it's also social and emotional that becomes problematic for you while you're going through that journey. And we're just not preparing kids to deal with what they're gonna face when they walk out of here.
Thank you.
Add on something to Mayor just said. I had mentors, because I was a C student, because I had to work at night. I worked right at this hospital called Presbyterian Hospital right here in Newark. Find somebody that you like, that you see and admire, And what I did was went up to them and introduced myself when I was in school and said, could they teach me what they do? So mentorship is very important if you want to go past just the average and move up. So I just wanted to let you know. Yeah. So mentoring is very important. I wasn't very good at math in the beginning, so I went on and found the class that I could take so I could get better. And then eventually I did do my MBA. I was fortunate that Harvard heard about me 5 years ago. Now I'm gonna tell you, the reason why we're not growing sometimes is because we aren't sitting in that room. When I went up to Harvard, I thought I was thinking big. I thought I was thinking big. I was really thinking small. Got up there, they gave me a whole nother level of conversation. So surround yourself with the right people, get some mentors, sponsors, because that will supplement what you're learning for the basics in school. Because as the mayor said, the curriculum doesn't support us for wealth building, it supports us for getting a job.
Thank you. We have one more question. Two more? Okay.
How y'all doing?
Hi.
Hey everybody. Hey y'all.
Hi.
I'm Chop Stewart. I am a educator. I am a artist, a business owner of a design company, and a resident of Lincoln Park. And I took LPCCD's real estate development class and met the first Black woman, a developer. And I come from a line of this work. I am working to become a developer. And one of my first projects is leasing, not owning, but I'll be leasing the 3,200 square foot greenhouse as part of the Makerless project to turn it into a community center. Because to answer the young man, we need places in our community. And I've been doing creative placemaking before it was called that. So my question is, I've been experiencing barriers of entry in this process, and the money, I need the money to do this work in order to sustain the work. So it's not a place that exists for 1 year, it's a place that exists forever, right? My question is how, I've been running and applying for grants, right? But what are other ways that are more accessible than just begging and pleading and proving myself on a piece of paper to someone that what I'm doing is valuable and I know it's valuable, right? What are the ways other than grants? Is philanthropy open enough?
Let me just tell you, the big developers don't use their money. Just want you to know that. They don't use their money. So that's why I was talking not financial literacy, I said financial savvy. So maybe I can meet you offline, maybe the two of us can meet you offline.
Yes, please.
And we could talk about that because I met a couple of the individuals from the class and went over their performance, and they didn't understand how to get to their metric. So if you have to go before somebody that's going to give you the money, let's say you need to borrow $2 million. Well, your debt to equity ratio, do you know what that means?
Nope.
Okay, there we have it. You call me up, we gotta figure that one out. Because you have to know your debt to equity ratio. You don't know your debt to equity ratio, you personally. The underwriter gets to say, he doesn't know it, he sees a piece of paper. Okay, but he's gonna look at that debt to equity ratio. So we wanna really strengthen up the community. And if Anthony wants to start another class where we come in and we just put numbers on the board and then make you struggle to learn and understand, you need to understand your numbers. So when you go in, you can argue back with Jean here and say, John, listen, I have a $20 million project coming up. This is what I'm gonna make on my return. Here's my performer for 5 years or 10 years. And they hear your command of understanding, they might pause and say, oh, okay, she knows what she's talking about. So let's talk offside.
Thank you.
Figure out how to buy that property.
Yes, I agree.
Hello, panelists. My name is Karen Dinkins, and I have louder. Okay. Hello, my name is Karen Dinkins, and I have 2 jobs. One job, I'm working at the Newark Public Library as a special events coordinator, so I'd like to give a shout out to the Newark Public Library. The second second job that I have is I'm a real estate agent for Remax Select. And Mayor Ras Baraka, how, I have a question, do you put a cap on people from other communities coming in and buying up Newark, buying up lots? There are people that have 40 properties in their portfolio. I'm a resident of Newark, New Jersey. I live in Society Hill. There are people coming in buying up that area. And as a real estate agent, it's difficult for me to sell properties because, like you're saying, Ms. Green, people don't want to work with people that look like me. You know, that look like them. I want to get somebody from Sotheby's to sell my house, you know, my 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house. So I just want to know, what do you have in place to ensure that people don't come in and buy up our properties? Because people that live in Newark, they don't want to stay in Newark anymore and they don't want to buy.
Well, one, that's not true. 'Cause
Well,
people
that's my experience that people tell me.
Well, there are people buying property all over this town from Newark. That's number one.
Okay.
And so there's a whole movement of people that are buying property.
Well, I
and they
saw
go
your
to the
recent
business.
$1 initiative. That's fabulous.
Right. But other than that, there are people that are developing and purchasing property. We kind of foster these people to do that. So it's very deliberate and intentional with folks that are buying properties in their own neighborhoods and trying to build it.
Right.
But you can't stop people from buying out. We live in capitalism. So they would throw me in jail. They would figure out how to do that. If somebody has money and they come into your town and buy it, that's how capitalism works. Then they have the right to buy it.
Right, but that's at the detriment of Newarkers a lot
Right,
of
and that's
times.
why earlier I talked about we have to create programming and be very deliberate and intentional about things that we create in the city to protect people from the things that are going on. You cannot stop people. It's not unlawful for what Marjorie said, for investors to come into the city and buy property. They can do that. That's their constitutional right if they have the money to buy property that people want to sell them. If your property forecloses and they go to the auction and buy your property, they own it. There's nothing the city or anybody else can do about it. But poke our lips out. We can be active on a reverse end though and purchase property ourselves in a collective, which is what we are doing. We get to purchase property ourselves in a collective to compete against the kind of wave that's happening on the other side of it. We have to do it that way. We got to buy our own property and we have to develop our own property. And the city begins to do that by saying, look, law that we just passed, any city property we own, at least 50% of it, the first right of refusal has to go to nonprofit local developers. So we have to look for local nonprofit developers to sell the property to first before we sell it to anybody else. But that doesn't inhibit people from buying property from you, right? Because we don't own all of the property.
No,
right? So
no.
a private developer, a private owner can sell their property to anybody they want.
Right.
If somebody come to you and offer you $300,000 cash, or $250,000 cash, which is what they're giving you, probably $200,000 to $250,000 cash, and your property is probably worth $500,000, and you don't know it. You taking the $200,000, going to South Carolina, and a year later you'll be back in Newark looking for a job. But ultimately that's what's happening, right? Because the value of the properties in Newark are doubling and tripling, which is why people are figuring out. There's a property in North Fork that's sold for $1 million.
Right.
In the city,
Yeah.
right around the corner from my house. I live in the Wheatway section. Property sold for $575,000. Was on the market for 2 weeks.
Right.
Period. So people are purchasing these properties, and there's no law that you can create to stop them from doing that. The only thing that we can do is do the reverse, try to incentivize people to purchase property in this community. That's it.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Little vertically challenged. Hi everyone, thank you so much for this this session today. This is powerful. My name is Catherine Mbali. I'm many things. I'm an arts administrator, I'm a curator. I take families from here. My husband and I take families from here. We travel to Cuba and Senegal and Gambia. We do many things. I'm also do lots of work on reparations. I have a podcast, I do workshops and educating folks, specifically artists, on reparations and how they can be involved in the movement in creating new realities for us as a people in the country. And lastly, my question is directed to my last hat that I wear as a developer. I take shipping containers and I build creative economies, microeconomies for communities. I did my first one in East New York, Brooklyn, in Baraka, if you're familiar with the council members there. We had a $1 million contract with EDC in New York City. And so throughout that process and throughout my career, I've been really grounded in Audre Lorde's writing, Audre Lorde Ibaye, in her book, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. And so I'm really grounded and really interested in cooperative economies and how we can get out of dismantling the system of capitalism and creating new economies for us and our people. And so my question is, have you had any examples or if you know any models where not only folks who can get in the game economically that have, and some of us do have the opportunities to get inside the game, but how can our neighbors also benefit in creating equity for them as well and creating for them to be able to get in at different levels and create return and wealth generation for all of us. As Dick Gregory says, I'm not rich unless 100 people around me are as well. So I'm really grounded in that philosophy, and I wanted to hear some ideas on creating new realities for us.
Well, there's we are using containers here in Newark. Sari has a project where he's using containers. We use them for creating Hope Village for folks without addresses, and we're developing another one right now on Clinton Avenue. The third one we're going to build with the help of NJIT. There are spaces in Newark that have used the model of collectivity around co-ops and buildings. Some of them even started off as low-income properties that are now collectively owned by, and a lot of folks in Newark don't even know that, collectively owned by the people in that community that we have to give tax abatements to, or figure out how to give, they be trying to take them away, we have to figure out how to give a tax abatement to these people so they can continue to own the property that they live in collectively in Newark. So that model is successful. We're trying to implement or do that over and over and over again with the space to be able to do that. And also the idea that we are collectively trying to push everybody together to be a part of collective ownership of particular neighborhoods. Like, as opposed to before, the model was if you had the money, you could buy 40 lots that the city owned just because you had the money. So we're changing that to the point where you can't buy all of those lots anymore, right? You can buy those lots if you buy them collectively with people. Like if you join with a group of folks, a nonprofit organization, a local developer, so forth and so on, and y'all collectively figure out how to purchase all of this and we develop it. That's what we're trying to do in that vein. It doesn't go as far as what you're saying, which is trying to make the people who live there actually own it as well. But I think that's something on the horizon that we need to begin thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we ran over a little time, but this was such a great conversation. First of all, thank you to all of you. My name is Anthony Smith, Executive Director at Lincoln Park Post-Cultural District, and I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists. This was such a great conversation. It's much needed and needs to be continued. Thank you, Jean-Pierre Brotis.
It's all right, it's okay.
Jean-Pierre Brotis, Marjorie Perry, Sharnita C. Johnson, and our mayor, our leader, Mayor Raz J. Baraka. Enjoy the rest of the Black Creative Economy Summit. Thank you.